The first signal reached the Valkyrie homeworld in what humans would call the year 1924. It was weak, broken, and filled with static. But it was there. A voice from the dark, a species talking to itself, not knowing anyone was listening. High Commander Talavek stood before the Council of Elders that day. His scales were bright with excitement. In his 40 years of service, he had found 17 species worthy of conquest. But this one was different. This one was young. They call themselves humans, he reported. They live on the third planet of a small yellow star. They have just discovered how to send their voices through the air without wires. They are primitive. They are weak. They are perfect. The council listened carefully. The Valkyrie Dominion had built an empire across 200 star systems. They had crushed 47 species under their claws. They knew how to conquer. More importantly, they knew how to wait. How primitive? Asked Elder Vormas, the oldest member of the council. Talvex brought up images on the display screen. Strange creatures with soft skin and no natural weapons. No claws, no scales, no venom. They wore clothes made from plant fibers. They traveled in machines that burned dead plants for fuel. They killed each other with small metal projectiles fired from tubes. The council members made sounds of amusement. They fight among themselves constantly, Talvex continued. They are divided into hundreds of small territories. They cannot agree on anything. They share a single world and still find reasons to hate each other. Elder Vormas leaned forward. And their military capability? Laughable. Their most powerful weapons use chemical explosions. Their fastest vehicles barely break the speed of sound. They have not even reached their own moon. The decision was made that day. The Valkyrie would watch. They would learn. They would prepare. And when the time was right, they would take Earth for themselves. A secret base was built on the dark side of Earth's moon. From there, Valkyrie observers watched everything. They recorded human radio transmissions. They studied human languages. They mapped human cities. They counted human weapons. Decades passed. The humans grew. They fought a great war that spread across their entire world. The Valkyrie watched with interest as humans killed millions of their own kind over pieces of land and ideas. Such a violent species, they noted. Such passion, such waste. Then something changed. In 1945, the humans split the atom. A bright flash over a city called Hiroshima told the Valkyrie that humanity had taken its first step toward real power. The observers sent an urgent message home, but the council was not worried. Primitive nuclear fission, they said. We mastered this technology 10,000 years ago. They are still children playing with fire. The watching continued. Humans reached their moon in 1969. The Valkyrie observers had to move their base deeper into the lunar caves to avoid detection. They watched the human astronauts bounce across the gray dust in their clumsy suits. They listened to the excited voices crackling through human radios. One small step, the human said. The Valkyrie found this amusing. One small step indeed. Humans had traveled a tiny distance in a fragile metal can. The Valkyrie could cross galaxies. More decades passed. The humans built thinking machines they called computers. They connected these machines into a global network. They sent robots to explore their neighboring planets. They pointed telescopes at the stars and wondered if they were alone. You are not alone, thought the Valkyrie, and you will wish you were. By the year 2000, the council decided the time was almost right. Humanity had grown strong enough to be useful as slaves but was still weak enough to be conquered easily. The invasion planning began. Admiral Vor then was chosen to lead the attack. He was the finest military mind of his generation. He had personally overseen the conquest of 12 worlds. Not once had he failed. For 24 years, Vor then studied everything about Earth. He read human military histories. He analyzed human battle tactics. He watched human war movies and found them entertaining. The humans always imagined themselves winning against alien invaders. They always found some clever trick, some weakness to exploit. Vor then smiled at their innocence. There would be no weakness. There would be no trick. There would only be overwhelming force. The fleet he assembled was the largest in Valkyrie history. 12,000 warships, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a continent. 4 million soldiers, trained and eager for battle. 100 years of preparation coming together into a single, perfect moment. On the day before the invasion, Vor then addressed his commanders. Tomorrow, we will take our place among the greatest conquerors in Velkari history, he said. The humans do not know we exist. They cannot imagine what is coming. By the time they understand what is happening, it will already be over. He brought up an image of Earth on the display screen. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in the atmosphere. It was a beautiful world. It would make a fine addition to the Dominion. Our projections show total planetary control within 3 solar rotations. Vor then continued. The humans will resist, of course. They always do, at first. But they will learn. They will submit. They will serve. His commanders stomped their feet in approval. The sound echoed through the great hall like thunder. That night, Admiral Vor then stood alone in his quarters aboard the flagship Eternal Conquest. He looked out at the stars and thought about the century of work that had led to this moment. So many observers, so many reports, so much patience. The humans had a saying he had found in their transmissions. Good things come to those who wait. Tomorrow, the Velkari would prove that saying true. He slept well that night. His dreams were filled with victory parades and the grateful praise of the council. He dreamed of statues built in his honor. He dreamed of his name being remembered for 1,000 generations. He did not dream of what was actually waiting for him. Across the dark void of space, on the blue world below, humanity went about its ordinary business. People went to work. Children went to school. Couples argued and made up. Old people sat in parks and watched birds. None of them knew that 12,000 alien warships were about to enter their solar system. None of them knew that their lives were about to change forever. And none of them knew the secret that had been kept from them for over 60 years. A secret buried deep beneath mountains and hidden behind ordinary-looking office buildings. A secret that would make Admiral Vorthen's careful century of preparation completely meaningless. The invasion was about to begin. It would not go the way the Velkari expected. The Velkari fleet dropped out of hyperspace at exactly 0347 Universal Earth time. It was a Tuesday. Most of the planet was either asleep or just waking up. Coffee was being made. Alarms were being ignored. Dogs were being walked. Nobody looked up at the sky. There was nothing to see yet. In orbit beyond the moon, 12,000 warships arranged themselves into the traditional sphere of annihilation. This formation had been used against 47 species. It had never failed. The ships formed a perfect geometric pattern, surrounding the target planet from all directions. No escape. No hope. Only surrender. Admiral Vor then stood on the command bridge of the Eternal Conquest, his flagship. Around him, his officers worked at their stations with calm efficiency. This was a moment they had trained for their entire lives. All ships report ready, Admiral, said Fleet Commander Kextal. Excellent. Vor then allowed himself a small smile. Open a channel to the planet, all frequencies. The communications officer made adjustments to his console. Channel open, Admiral. Vor then stepped forward. He had practiced this speech many times. The first words the humans would hear from their conquerors. They had to be perfect. People of Earth, he began, his voice carrying across every radio frequency on the planet. I am Admiral Vorthen of the Velkari Dominion. Your world now belongs to us. You have 1 hour to surrender your governments, your militaries, and your future. Resistance is... The transmission cut off. Vor then frowned and looked at his communications officer. What happened? The officer's scales had gone pale. His claws trembled over his console. Sir, something is jamming us. On all frequencies. Every single one. He looked up with wide eyes. That should not be possible. Our encryption systems are the most advanced in the galaxy. Fix it. Vor then ordered. I am trying, Admiral. Whatever is blocking us, it is not using any technology I recognize. Before Vor then could respond, the sensor officer spoke up. His voice was tight with confusion. Admiral, I am detecting a contact. Single vessel. Coming from behind the moon. One vessel? Vor then almost laughed. They send one ship against 12,000? Show me. The main display screen lit up with a tactical map. The Velkari fleet appeared as thousands of green dots arranged in their perfect sphere. Earth floated in the center, blue and innocent. And there, moving toward them from the lunar shadow, was a single red dot. Speed? Vor then asked. The sensor officer checked his readings twice before answering. Admiral, I must be reading this wrong. The vessel appears to be traveling at point 0.7 light speed and accelerating. That is impossible. Nothing can accelerate that fast without. It is here, the sensor officer whispered. Vor then looked at the viewport. The tiny ship had crossed the distance between the moon and the fleet in seconds. It now hung in space directly in front of the Eternal Conquest. Close enough to see with his own eyes, the vessel was smaller than a Valkyrie shuttle, maybe 20 meters long. Its surface was completely black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. There were no visible engines, no visible weapons, no markings of any kind. It simply floated there, silent and strange. What is that? Kextal asked. Nobody answered. A new transmission came through the speakers. Somehow, it bypassed all their security protocols. A female voice, speaking perfect Valkyrie language with no accent at all. Admiral Vor then. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Vessel Adequate Response. You have entered restricted space. You have 60 seconds to withdraw your fleet beyond the lunar boundary. This is your only warning. Silence filled the bridge. The officers looked at each other, uncertain how to react. Then Vor then began to laugh. It started as a chuckle and grew into a full roar of amusement. His officers joined in, their fear replaced by disbelief. One ship, Vor then said, wiping moisture from his eyes. They send one tiny ship and demand that we retreat. The arrogance of these creatures is almost admirable. He straightened his posture and let his amusement fade into cold authority. Target that vessel, all forward batteries. Erase it. With pleasure, Admiral, the weapons officer replied. 400 warships oriented their main cannons toward the small black ship. These weapons could crack moons. They could turn cities into glass. They had broken the will of dozens of species. Fire, Vor then commanded. The void lit up with directed energy. Beams of superheated plasma converged on the adequate response from every direction. The amount of firepower released in that single volley could have destroyed a small planet. Vor then watched with satisfaction as the human ship disappeared in a sphere of blinding light. The bridge crew made sounds of approval. When the light faded, his satisfaction turned to ice. The ship was still there, undamaged, unmoved. It had not even tried to dodge. 400 of the most powerful weapons in the Valkyrie arsenal had hit it directly, and it showed no damage at all. That is, not possible, Kextal said. Fire again, Vor then ordered. All ships, everything we have. The entire fleet opened fire. 12,000 ships unleashed their full arsenal. The space around the human vessel became a storm of energy and light that burned brighter than a star. It lasted for 30 seconds. Then the weapons fell silent. Their power cells depleted. The adequate response hung exactly where it had been. If anything, it seemed bored. Captain Chen's voice returned to the speakers. That was disappointing. But noted, the tactical display flickered. Every Valkyrie ship suddenly showed a new symbol next to its marker. A small red triangle, blinking steadily. What is that? Vor then demanded. The weapons officer's voice came out as a croak. Target locks, Admiral, on every single one of our ships. All 12,000. Coming from. He checked his readings 3 times. Coming from that one vessel. Vor then stared at the tiny black ship through the viewport. For the first time in his long career, he felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. How? He whispered. How is this possible? We watched them for 100 years. We knew everything about them. They were primitive. They were weak. How can they have this? No one on the bridge had an answer. Across the void, in the cockpit of the adequate response, Captain Sarah Chen took a sip of her coffee. It was still warm. She had made it fresh before the alert came in, and the whole encounter so far had taken less than 3 minutes. She looked at the Valkyrie fleet on her display screen. 12,000 ships, 4 million soldiers, a century of preparation. They had no idea what they were dealing with. She opened a channel back to Earth, to the place called Lighthouse Command, hidden beneath the mountains of what used to be Colorado. This is Chen, she reported. First contact complete. They shot first, as expected, requesting permission to proceed with standard response protocols. A calm voice replied, Permission granted, Captain. Try not to make a mess. Chen smiled and set down her coffee cup. No promises, she said. The story of how humanity discovered the Valkyrie began with a young woman named Eleanor Marsh and a radio telescope in West Virginia. It was 1962. The Cold War was at its peak. America and Russia pointed nuclear weapons at each other across the globe. The world felt like it might end at any moment. Nobody was thinking about aliens. Eleanor was 23 years old, fresh out of university, working the night shift at the Green Bank Observatory. Her job was simple: listen to the sky and record anything interesting. Most nights, she heard nothing but static and the occasional pulsar. But that night was different. At 3:17 inches the morning, her equipment picked up a signal coming from the direction of the moon. It was brief, lasting only 4 seconds. It was clearly artificial, and it was definitely not human. Eleanor listened to the recording 17 times. She checked her equipment for errors. She ran every test she could think of. The signal was real, she told her supervisor. Her supervisor told his supervisor. Within 48 hours, Eleanor Marsh was sitting in a bunker beneath the White House, playing her recording for the President of the United States. "Are you certain this is not Russian?" the President asked. "Sir, the signal came from the far side of the moon," Eleanor explained. "The Russians cannot reach the far side of the moon. Neither can we. Whatever sent this signal is not from Earth." The room fell silent. Military generals, intelligence directors, scientific advisors, all of them staring at a young woman from West Virginia who had just changed the course of human history. "What do we do?" someone asked. The President thought for a long moment. Then he made a decision that would remain secret for over 60 years. "We prepare," he said. "Quietly, secretly. We assume the worst and we prepare for it." Project Lighthouse was born that night. Its existence was classified above top secret. Only a handful of people in each generation would know the truth. The President, a few key generals, selected scientists. Nobody else. The mission was simple: find out who was watching Earth, figure out what they wanted, and develop the technology to survive first contact. For the public, life continued normally. The space race, the moon landing, the personal computer revolution, the internet, smartphones, social media, ordinary human progress, moving at an ordinary human pace. But beneath the surface, a second kind of progress was happening. Lighthouse brought together the greatest minds humanity had ever produced: physicists, engineers, mathematicians, biologists. They were given unlimited funding and complete freedom. Their only instruction was to solve problems that seemed impossible. In 1978, a team in Switzerland figured out how to generate energy from the vacuum of space itself. This discovery meant unlimited power. No more oil, no more nuclear reactors, no more pollution. It could have transformed human civilization overnight. They kept it secret. In 1991, a researcher in Japan discovered how to manipulate gravity, not just understand it, but actually control it. Objects could be made lighter or heavier at will. Flight without engines became possible. They kept it secret. In 2004, a teenager in Nigeria accidentally created a small hole in space while working on a science fair project. She had been trying to build a better radio. Instead, she opened a window to another location, 3 meters away. The first human teleportation device, invented by a 16-year-old girl with a brilliant mind and no idea what she had done. Lighthouse recruited her within hours. Her name was Adaeze Okonkwo. She would go on to design the engines that powered the adequate response. Year after year, decade after decade, humanity grew stronger in the shadows. The Valkyrie watched the surface and saw what they expected to see: a divided species, fighting over resources, struggling with basic technology, completely unaware of the danger watching from the darkness. They did not see the research stations hidden beneath mountains and oceans. They did not see the factories building weapons that used principles of physics they had not discovered. They did not see the training facilities where human soldiers learned to fight enemies that did not yet exist. By 2024, humanity had matched the Valkyrie in every area of technology. By 2030, they had surpassed them. The irony was perfect. The Valkyrie had watched humanity for a century, studying their weaknesses, cataloging their failures, waiting for the right moment to strike. They saw exactly what humanity wanted them to see: the public face, the puppet show, the distraction. The real humanity was hidden behind the curtain, building weapons that could unmake matter itself. Captain Sarah Chen was born in 2001, the year the first human starship was secretly launched. She grew up in a world that knew nothing about Lighthouse. She went to normal schools. She had normal friends. She thought the future would be normal too. Then, on her 18th birthday, two people in dark suits knocked on her door. They showed her things that changed everything she believed about the world. They offered her a choice. She chose to protect her planet. For the next 20 years, Chen trained and served in a military that did not officially exist. She flew ships that broke every law of physics the public knew about. She visited places in the solar system that no official mission had ever reached. When the alert came through that morning, she had been stationed on lunar patrol for 6 months. Boring duty, usually. Nothing ever happened. Until 12,000 alien warships dropped out of hyperspace. Chen had read the files on the Velkari. She knew about their empire. She knew about the 47 species they had conquered. She knew about their century of watching. She also knew something the Velkari did not. The adequate response was not humanity's most powerful ship. It was not even in the top 10. It was a patrol vessel, the equivalent of a Coast Guard cutter. It had been assigned to lunar duty because nothing important ever happened near the moon. If the Velkari had attacked with their full fleet 100 years ago, they might have won. Even 50 years ago, the fight would have been close. But they had waited. They had been patient. They had prepared carefully. And while they prepared, humanity had been preparing too. Now, as Chen watched the Velkari fleet on her display, she felt something unexpected. Not fear, not excitement, pity. They had crossed the galaxy. They had assembled the largest invasion force in their history. They had spent a century planning this moment. They had no idea that the moment they arrived, they had already lost. Lighthouse Command, Chen said into her communicator. I am beginning standard response protocols. Estimated time to completion, under 5 minutes. Understood, Captain. We are watching. Chen took one last sip of her coffee. It was almost cold now. Here we go, she said. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, Admiral Vor then watched the small black ship begin to move. It drifted toward his fleet like a leaf on gentle water, slow and peaceful. He did not understand yet. He would understand soon. The 6 minutes had begun. The first minute was confusion. Admiral Vor then watched the small human ship drift toward his fleet. Every weapon on every ship had failed to scratch it. Every communication channel was blocked. His entire invasion force sat helpless while a single vessel smaller than his personal shuttle moved among them like a ghost. Can we ram it? He asked desperately. Fleet Commander Kextal shook his head. We tried, Admiral. The ships closest to it cannot move. Their engines are working, but they are staying in place. It is like space itself is holding them still. Vor then slammed his fist against the console. That is impossible. Everything they are doing is impossible. Perhaps, Kextal said quietly. We did not understand them as well as we thought. The adequate response stopped in the center of the Velkari formation. For a moment, nothing happened. The 12,000 warships waited. The 4 million soldiers held their breath. Then the human ship released something. Small objects, each one no bigger than a Velkari fist. They poured out of the vessel like seeds from a flower, spreading in all directions. The sensors counted them. 247 objects, moving through the fleet at impossible speeds. What are those? Vor then demanded. Nobody knew. The objects showed no energy signature. They made no noise. They simply floated to positions throughout the fleet, one near each cluster of ships. The second minute was fear. A transmission came through to every ship simultaneously. The human captain's voice, calm and clear. Admiral Vor then, I want you to understand something. We are not doing this because we enjoy it. We are not doing this because we hate you. We are doing this because you gave us no choice. You came here to conquer us. You came here to enslave us. You fired first. She paused. When she spoke again, her voice was almost gentle. What happens next is the consequence of your choices, not ours. The small objects began to glow with a soft blue light. On every ship in the fleet, alarms started screaming. Warning systems that had never been triggered before came alive with urgent messages. Unknown energy field detected. Hull integrity threatened. Recommend immediate evacuation. But there was nowhere to evacuate to. The third minute was desperation. Jump to hyperspace. Vor then shouted. All ships, emergency jump now. Across the fleet, engineers activated their hyperspace drives. The engines powered up normally. The jump calculations completed perfectly. The ships tried to leave. They went nowhere. The drives are working, Admiral, the navigation officer reported, his voice shaking. But space is not responding. Something is preventing the jump. We are locked in place. Vor then looked out the viewport at the blue world floating in the distance. So close. If they could not escape, perhaps they could still complete their mission. All ships, attack Earth directly, he commanded. Ignore the human vessel. Destroy their planet. If we die here, we take them with us. 3,000 ships broke formation and accelerated toward Earth. Their engines burned at maximum power, pushing them toward the helpless planet below. Victory or death. The Valkyrie way. They traveled 400 kilometers. Then they stopped. Every single ship, at exactly the same moment, as if they had hit an invisible wall. No impact, no damage. They simply could not go forward anymore. Space itself had become a barrier. No, Vor then whispered. No, this cannot be happening. The fourth minute was horror. Captain Chen's voice returned. Admiral, I am going to give you one more chance. Order your fleet to power down all weapons. Do it now, and I will spare your flagship. You will live to return home and tell your people what happened here. Refuse, and the eternal conquest dies with the rest. Vor then stared at the communication panel. His entire body had gone cold. His scales had turned gray with shock. Pride and survival warred within him. Pride won. I am Admiral Vor then of the Valkyrie Dominion, he said. I do not surrender to insects. I do not beg for mercy from primitives. Do your worst, human. History will remember that we did not bow. There was a long pause. When Chen spoke again, she sounded almost sad. History will not remember you at all, Admiral. But I will honor your request. The blue glow from the small objects intensified. It spread outward like rings in water, touching every ship in the fleet except the Eternal Conquest. The fifth minute was destruction. What happened next defied description. The Valkyrie ships did not explode. They did not burn. They did not break apart. They simply stopped being ships. The energy field released by the small objects did something to the atomic bonds that held matter together. It convinced those bonds to release. It told the atoms that they did not need to stay connected anymore. And the atoms listened. 12,000 warships dissolved like morning frost under a warm sun. The process was almost beautiful, each vessel transforming into a cloud of disconnected particles, drifting apart, spreading into the void. No flames, no debris. Just matter returning to its simplest form. 4 million Valkyrie soldiers ceased to exist as organized beings. Their atoms joined the atoms of their ships, floating freely through space, catching the light of distant stars. The entire process took 47 seconds. The sixth minute was silence. Where the greatest invasion fleet in Valkyrie history had been, there was now nothing but empty space and gently glowing particles. The Eternal Conquest floated alone, its crew staring through viewports at the absence of everything they had known. Admiral Vor then could not move. He could not speak. His mind refused to accept what his eyes had seen. 12,000 ships, 4 million soldiers, 100 years of preparation, gone. All of it gone. The adequate response drifted past his viewport, close enough that he could see the small vessel clearly. It showed no damage. It showed no sign that it had just destroyed an entire fleet. It looked exactly the same as when it had first appeared. Captain Chen's voice came through one final time. Your weapons are disabled, Admiral. Your engines are locked. Your communications array has been removed. But your life support systems will continue to function. You have enough supplies to survive the journey home if you ration carefully. Why? Vor then managed to croak. Why spare me? Because someone needs to tell your people what happened here. Someone needs to deliver a message. Vor then closed his eyes. He thought of his homeworld. He thought of the Council of Elders. He thought of how they would react when he returned alone, with nothing but a story that no one would want to believe. What message? He asked. I will tell you that soon, Chen replied. First, I am coming aboard. We need to talk face to face. Vor then opened his eyes. Through the viewport, he saw a small shuttle detach from the adequate response and begin moving toward his ship. The human was coming to him, alone, after destroying his entire fleet. For the first time, Vor then understood something important. He had spent a century studying humans as predators study prey. He had analyzed their weaknesses. He had cataloged their failures. He had prepared to crush them like insects. He had never, not once, considered that they might be doing the same to him. The shuttle docked with the Eternal Conquest. The human captain was about to board his ship, and Admiral Vorthen, supreme commander of the greatest fleet in Valkyrie history, found himself terrified of a single small creature with soft skin and no claws. The universe had just taught him a lesson he would never forget. Size does not matter. Numbers do not matter. Time does not matter. Only power matters. And humanity had more of it than he had ever imagined possible. Captain Sarah Chen walked through the corridors of the Eternal Conquest alone. She had left her weapons on the shuttle. She carried nothing but a small data crystal in her pocket. The Valkyrie soldiers she passed pressed themselves against the walls, their scales pale with terror. They had watched their fleet disappear. They had seen what one human ship could do. None of them dared to touch her. She found Admiral Vor then on the bridge, exactly where she expected him to be. He stood at the main viewport, staring out at the empty space where 12,000 ships had been. His officers sat frozen at their stations, afraid to move. Chen stopped a few meters away from him. She was not tall by human standards. Vor then towered over her by nearly a meter. His claws could have torn her apart in seconds. He did not move. "Admiral," she said. Slowly, he turned to face her. His eyes had changed. The pride and confidence she had heard in his transmission were gone. In their place was something hollow and broken. "How?" he asked. His voice cracked on the word. "How is this possible? We watched you for 100 years. We knew everything about your species. You were primitive. You were divided. You were weak." Chen nodded. "That is what we wanted you to think. You knew we were watching? Since 1962. 62 years before you even decided to attack." She smiled slightly. "You spent a century learning about the wrong humanity." Vor then closed his eyes. The transmissions, the wars, the failures. All of it was a performance? Not exactly. Humans really did fight those wars. We really are divided on many things. But while we argued about politics and borders and who said what on social media, a very small group of people was preparing for this day. She walked past him to the viewport. The glowing particles of his fleet drifted slowly through space, catching the light of distant stars. "We expected you to be stronger," she admitted. "We built weapons that could destroy entire star systems. We prepared for an enemy that could fight back. Instead, we got you." Vor then made a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. "You expected us to be stronger? We were the greatest military power in this region of the galaxy. We conquered 47 species. 47 species who were not expecting you. 47 species who were caught by surprise, just like you planned to catch us." Chen turned to face him. "But we were expecting you, Admiral. We had 60 years to prepare, and humans are very good at preparing for war." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the data crystal. It glowed with a soft blue light in her palm. "This contains everything. Sensor recordings from your ships during the battle, technical data proving that what you saw was real, and a message for your Council of Elders." Vor then looked at the crystal like it was a poisonous animal. "What message?" Chen placed the crystal on the console between them. Then she took a step back and spoke clearly, as if she was addressing the entire Valkyrie species. "We spent a long time being afraid of the dark. Every human culture has stories about monsters in the night, creatures that come from the shadows to destroy us, invaders from the stars who see us as nothing more than insects." She paused. "We told ourselves these stories because we were preparing ourselves. Deep down, we always knew that someday, something would come. And when that day arrived, we wanted to be ready." Her expression shifted. The warmth faded from her eyes. "You were that something, Admiral. You came from the dark to conquer us. And in responding to you, we discovered something about ourselves. We discovered that we had become the monsters we were afraid of." Vor then said nothing. He simply listened. "The message is simple," Chen continued. "Go home. Tell your people what happened here. Show them the recordings. Let them understand what they saw." She stepped closer to him. Despite the height difference, despite his claws and scales and physical strength, she was clearly the more dangerous one in the room. Earth does not want war. We do not want to conquer anyone. We want to live our lives in peace. We want to raise our children, build our cities, watch our sunsets. We want to be left alone. Her voice hardened. But if anyone comes for us again, if the Valkyrie or any other species in this galaxy ever threatens our world, we will respond. Not with warnings, not with negotiations, not with measured force. She met his eyes directly. We will erase you so completely that the universe itself will forget you ever existed. Your species, your homeworld, your history, your memory, everything you are and everything you have ever been will become nothing but dust drifting between dead stars. The bridge was absolutely silent. Every Valkyrie present had stopped breathing. That is the message, Admiral. Make sure your council understands it. She turned and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she paused and looked back. One more thing. We are not unreasonable. If the Valkyrie want to establish peaceful contact in the future, we are open to that. Trade, cultural exchange, scientific cooperation. We have much to offer each other. A ghost of warmth returned to her voice. But only as equals. Only in peace. And only if you never, ever, make the mistake of threatening us again. She left without waiting for a response. Vor then stood alone on the bridge of his crippled flagship. The data crystal sat on the console, glowing softly. Around him, his officers slowly began to move again, processing what they had just witnessed. The journey home took 6 months. The Eternal Conquest limped through space on minimal power. The crew rationed their supplies carefully. They spoke little. What was there to say? Their entire understanding of the universe had been destroyed along with their fleet. When Vor then finally stood before the Council of Elders, he played the recordings without commentary. The Council watched 12,000 ships dissolve into nothing. They watched a single human vessel do the impossible. They heard Captain Chen deliver her message. The chamber was silent for a long time after the recording ended. Finally, Elder Vormass spoke. What do you recommend, Admiral? Vor then had thought about this question every day for 6 months. His answer was simple. We forget Earth exists. We mark their space as forbidden. We never speak of this again. The Council agreed. Within a year, all records of Earth were sealed. Star charts showing the Sol system were updated with a single symbol, a Valkyrie glyph, meaning forbidden. Any ship that approached that region of space would be destroyed by their own government. The blue world became a legend. Parents told their children stories about the monsters who lived near the small yellow star. Never go there, they would say. Never even look in that direction. There are things in the dark that even we cannot fight. On Earth, life continued normally. The public never learned how close they had come to invasion. They never learned about Lithouse or the Secret Fleet or the century of hidden preparation. They kept arguing about politics and watching reality television and posting pictures of their food online. Captain Sarah Chen retired from the UEDF 3 years after the invasion. She bought a small house on the coast of Portugal, where she could watch the Atlantic Ocean and see the sunset every evening. Sometimes, on clear nights, she would look up at the stars. She wondered if the Valkyrie were out there, watching from a safe distance, remembering what had happened. She hoped they were. She hoped they would never forget, because humanity was still out there too. Still watching, still preparing, still ready to defend their small blue world against anything the universe might send. The monsters in the dark had learned a valuable lesson that day. Sometimes, the things you hunt are hunting you back. And sometimes, the prey has teeth you never expected. Earth was safe. Earth would always be safe, because humanity had decided it would be so, and there was nothing in the galaxy that could change that now.